another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Elaine, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the April 25th, 26th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the front page, the DOJ drops investigation of Powell. The Justice Department has said it would end its criminal investigation of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, an attempt to clear the obstacle that has stalled Kevin Warsh's confirmation as his successor. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, announced the move Friday, saying her office is closing an inquiry into Powell's testimony to Congress about cost overruns on the renovations of two historic Fed buildings. A federal judge has already ruled that the grand jury subpoenas served on the Fed in January were improper and found essentially zero evidence of criminal wrongdoing. Pirro wrote in a post on X that the Fed's Inspector General had been asked to scrutinize the matter. Powell himself had asked the central bank's IG to review the building projects last July, and that work is continuing. I expect a comprehensive report in short order and am confident the outcome will assist in resolving once and for all the questions that led this office to issue subpoenas, Pirro said. Note well, however, that I will not hesitate to restart a criminal investigation should the facts warrant doing so, she wrote. A Fed spokeswoman declined to comment. An end of the probe would close a confrontation over Fed independence without modern precedent. In a January video disclosing the probe, Powell had taken the unusual step of publicly accusing the executive branch of pursuing a pretext to pressure the central bank over interest rates. The reversal reflected how opposition to the probe from one Republican senator had forced the White House to choose between continuing the investigation or confirming Powell's proposed successor. In recent days, it had become evident to other Republicans that every additional week of the investigation was another week that Powell, whom President Trump has repeatedly disparaged and threatened to fire, would likely remain in the job. The about-face came 2 days after Pirro said publicly she intended to press on with the case. Trump, in an interview just before Warsh's confirmation hearing on Tuesday, brushed aside repeated suggestions that he had let Congress handle oversight of cost overruns and close the investigation. We have had to find out where the money went, Trump said. The Fed's Inspector General had published findings of an earlier audit of the renovations in 2021. The DOJ probe had shown signs of ramping up recently when two lawyers on Pirro's staff and a federal law enforcement agent sought access to the Fed's construction site, but were turned away. For Warsh, the decision offers a chance to clear the central obstacle to his confirmation. Senator Thom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, had said he wouldn't advance any Fed nominee while the probe is open. His vote is crucial because the Republicans have a 13-11 majority on the Senate Banking Committee, and all Democrats have refused to consider the nomination until the probe ends. Republican leaders of the House and Senate Banking Committees, which oversee the Fed, issued statements within hours welcoming the announcement. Tillis was silent, and a spokesman declined to comment. By Friday afternoon, it wasn't clear if Pirro's decision actually met the condition Tillis had laid out. When asked if Trump supported Pirro's decision, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said the case was not necessarily dropped, but just being moved over to the Inspector General's office. At Warsh's hearing, Tillis used his time to walk through a slide deck explaining the renovation costs. "You have extraordinary credentials. They're impeccable," Tillis told Warsh. "Let's get rid of this investigation so I can support your confirmation." Pressure on Trump and Pirro to drop the probe had built in the days after the hearing, when senior Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota, amplifying Tillis's appeal to move Warsh's nomination. The Senate is in session the coming week and the week of May 11th, leaving enough time for the Banking Committee and the full Senate to approve him. Powell, whose term as chair ends May 15th, has said he would continue to serve as the central bank's acting head or chair pro tempore if a successor isn't in place at the end of his term. Perot's statement said that she reserved the right to restart the investigation, raised questions Friday about whether the probe was closed or merely paused, a distinction that likely will matter for Powell, especially given the administration's recent handling of other legal matters. Last month, the Justice Department briefly abandoned its defense of executive orders sanctioning 4 law firms before reversing itself a day later at Trump's personal direction, continuing a pattern of intervention that has extended to seeking charges against individuals the president views as political adversaries. Upon the expiration of his term as chair, Powell faces a separate decision over whether to resign his seat as a Fed governor, which runs until early 2028. Last month, he laid out a key precondition when he said his decision would turn at a minimum on whether the investigation was well and truly over with transparency and finality. He also said his ultimate decision to stay or leave, and almost all Fed chiefs have exited at the conclusion of their term as chair, would be based on what I think is best for the institution and the people we serve. Trump, a Republican, told Fox Business last week that if Powell didn't leave, I'll have to fire him. Warsh has been nominated to fill the seat held by Fed Governor Stephen Moran, whose term expired at the end of January, but who can remain until Warsh is confirmed. If Powell departs the board, Trump could appoint either Moran or a new candidate to fill the vacancy. Trump has separately attempted to fire another Senate-confirmed Fed governor, Lisa Cook. The Supreme Court has allowed Cook to remain at the Fed while she challenges her removal. And in U.S. news, angst about jobs colors economic outlook. The unemployment rate is low, the stock market is high, consumer spending is healthy. But ask Americans how they feel about the economy, and they sound like there's a recession going on. That matters first because when people's perceptions of the economy sour, their behavior can change and slow the economy. And second, because sometimes they are seeing real problems that have yet to show up in hard data. Since the 1960s, economists have been asking Americans if they think unemployment will rise or fall in the year ahead. For a year, unemployment expectations have been at highs that in the past occurred only surrounding recessions. In Boise, Idaho, Andrew Morstead's co-working space has been hit with a bad luck streak. An Amazon.com engineer was laid off while others think they are about to be. Morstead still has a job, but he sees warning signs flashing. I think the economy is in for a hit soon, he said. He's a software engineer consultant. You take those high earners out of the economy and you're taking a big chunk of tax revenue too. Morstead's customers have been tightening their budgets and he's been tightening his own. Normally one to go out for food and drink 2 or 3 nights a week, he said he is reining in his social life. Despite the economy's on paper health, Morstead predicts widespread layoffs will deal the labor market a blow in the coming months. Friday, the University of Michigan said its measure of consumer sentiment fell to 49.8 in April, its lowest level in 70-plus years. The university has been regularly polling American consumers. People's assessment of the current state of the economy and their expectations for the future fell, with declines occurring across the board, regardless of political affiliation, income, age, or education. Consumers continue to be really worried about the trajectory of inflation, and over the last year there's been a pretty substantial weakening in labor market expectations, said Joanne Shu, the survey's director. The gloom is understandable. The Iran war has driven up gasoline prices. Whiplash tariff policies are hammering small businesses. The job market, while healthy by a lot of measures, is dotted with news of high-profile layoffs. Still, the sentiment figure contrasts with other economic reports out this week suggesting the economy is not close to a recession. On Tuesday, the Commerce Department reported that retail sales were solid in March, even after adjusting for elevated gasoline prices. On Thursday, the Labor Department reported that the level of jobless claims remained low. Meanwhile, the stock market is trading near record highs. It isn't just the Michigan survey throwing off bad vibes. March readings from both the New York Fed and the Conference Board showed consumers were in a foul mood on the economy. An April poll from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research released Tuesday shows that 73% of Americans think the economy is doing poorly. Although pump prices have been higher in the past, especially after adjusting for inflation, the size of March's jump in prices from a month earlier in both dollar and percentage terms was unprecedented. The pinch of higher gasoline prices is real, especially for lower income Americans, but because gasoline is a frequent purchase with well-advertised prices, it can play an outsized role on consumer moods. A family feeling skittish about the future might think twice about buying a house or starting a small business. A company might pause hiring. If enough people hold back, those choices can ripple through the economy. But people's views on the economy and their behavior don't always align. In June 2022, inflation was soaring, and the sentiment reading hit what at that point was its lowest reading on record, but consumer spending kept growing and the U.S. kept adding jobs at a rapid clip. One thing that is different now, however, is that people's view of the labor market is far worse. Details of Friday's Michigan report showed that 64% of survey respondents say they think that unemployment will be higher in a year than it is now, up from 61% in March and approaching the 69% registered in November. In June 2022, that figure was just 32%. Never before has the share of people expecting unemployment been as high as it is now without the economy experiencing a recession. The poor marks for the job market are showing up elsewhere. Unemployment expectations in New York Fed's survey have also been elevated, as has the share of people judging jobs as hard to get relative to plentiful in the Conference Board survey. A quarterly survey of U.S. professionals on LinkedIn shows that workers have had a downbeat assessment of the labor market for the past year. Workforce confidence is in the tank, and it's been in the tank for a bit of time now, said Corey Catania, LinkedIn's head of economics for the Americas. To an extent, the low reading on the job market could be a reflection of an old equilibrium it has settled into, with very little hiring and firing, immigration restrictions curtailing the supply of workers, and uncertainty over the effects of artificial intelligence. Despite some high-profile layoff announcements, Nike and Meta Platforms disclosed job cuts Thursday. The overall level of layoffs appear quite low as measured by weekly claims figures, the Labor Department's monthly layoff figures, and notices that larger businesses are required to file in advance of closings and mass layoffs. But hiring is extremely low, so people seeking work keep striking out, and that could be coloring perceptions of the job market for the job seekers themselves and for their friends and family. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the U.S. steps up online scam fight. The Trump administration announced criminal charges, sanctions, and multi-million-dollar rewards aimed at combating online scams coming out of Southeast Asia and targeting Americans. The measures, some of which were directed at the Cambodian senator featured in a recent Wall Street Journal investigation into cyber scam operations in the country, are the latest attempt by the U.S. to stem the illicit industry. Americans lost $10 billion to online fraud originating from Southeast Asian nations in 2024, U.S. government data show. Some estimates put the global criminal proceeds of the predominantly Chinese cyber gangs based in nations like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos at more than $60 billion a year. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro Thursday announced charges of wire fraud conspiracy against two Chinese men she said were managers in a Myanmar scam compound from where enslaved workers were forced to defraud Americans using fake websites and mobile apps. After their Myanmar compound was closed, the two men moved to another scam compound in Cambodia before they were arrested in Thailand this year on immigration charges. The two men, who are currently in custody in Thailand, couldn't immediately be reached to comment. In the scam uncovered by the Justice Department, victims received cold calls from individuals posing as staff of large U.S. banks, warning them that their accounts had been used to buy firearms. Victims were then transferred to fake NYPD detectives and New York Supreme Court and pressured to transfer their savings to the scammers, the department said. The Treasury Department, meanwhile, announced sanctions against Kok An, a Cambodian ruling party senator and tycoon, and several companies he owns. Treasury said Kok An's companies collect rental income from and provide security guards for compounds linked to his casinos. Kok An and his Onco Brothers group couldn't be reached Friday after the company's website appeared to have been taken down. They haven't responded to previous comment requests. Cambodia said the government was committed to rooting out transnational criminal networks operating from within its borders, but declined to comment on the sanctions against Kok An. In addition to the measures from the Justice Department and Treasury, the State Department announced a total of $14 million in rewards for information that leads to the seizure of proceeds from several Myanmar scam compounds and the capture of a dual Chinese and St. Kitts and Nevis national who is said to have laundered money from various scam compounds. The Myanmar and Laos embassies in Washington didn't respond to requests for comments. And startup cowboys create a Texas hotspot. An unusual community is taking shape in a suburb of Austin, a ranch-style house surrounded by trailer parks, a robotics facility, and a drone building site. The site, known as Prototown, is a 1,200-acre campus in Lockhart, Texas, a short drive from Elon Musk's Tesla headquarters. It serves as a business commune for young tech founders and other entrepreneurs who all live and work there. Founders and employees live together in the house or nearby trailer parks they call men camps. Workers at the dozen firms on site often eat meals as a group. Many work on their startups from morning to night. Prototown founders Josh Farazad, 26, and Merle Nye, 28, met while attending college at Duke. They worked on a variety of startups for years and then met John Searier, a longtime Texas politician. The three launched Prototown in 2024 with just under 6 figures of funding. Last month, the project was valued at around $100 million, following its first fundraising round. Venture capitalist Josh Kushner and Coinbase co-founder Fred Ersham are investors, the founders say. Startups on the site are attracted to the state's light regulation and the build anything atmosphere of Prototown and the surrounding Caldwell County. They're very willing to play ball, said Ethan Blogg, a Prototown member, referring to Prototown and the county. His startup, Dynamo, is trying to build drones to carry 10,000-pound payloads. Joining Prototown is a bit like rushing a fraternity. The founders welcome prospective companies to live and work on the site for a few days and then decide whether they are a good fit. The more mature companies pay for leases on large plots of land to test their products, while some early-stage founders pay only room and board. Many of Prototown's occupants mirror the attitudes of a newer generation of founders who believe in a build-at-all-cost approach. They cite China's manufacturing strengths as inspiration and share aspirations to build an American Shenzhen. Last fall, Daniel Weddle, 41, left his home in Bloomington, Indiana, where he ran an event venue, to move to Prototown. He lives now with his partner and 2 dogs in Prototown's trailer park. His company, Tehran, is testing a machine to build 3D printed homes out of dirt and clay. Every morning, he lugs a 5-gallon water tank into his trailer, and he eats lunch with a group of other founders on the site. I don't have to shop for groceries. I don't have to drive anywhere. My dogs don't need leashes. He said it's a very simple life. Prototown traces its origins to 2022, when Lockhart was a frontrunner to host $100 billion semiconductor facility for chipmaker Micron. But Micron opted instead to build in Clay, New York. Lockhart, population about 20,000, was still reeling from that loss when the Prototown founders arrived. We're going to build a city, Farzad recalled, thinking at the time. But first, he had to sell local politicians on his vision. Hoppy Hayden, the county's judge, said he was bewildered by their new city proposal at first. I thought they were kind of crazy, he said. They look a bit older than my grandkids. The founders won over Hayden and other politicians. The partners leased their first 3 parcels of barren, flat land for around $25,000 a month, anchored by a dilapidated ranch house. It was infested with so many scorpions that anyone entering the bathroom at night carried a flashlight. Prototown's Brain Trust came up with an unconventional recruitment strategy. They bought a decommissioned school bus, painted it bright red, and outfitted it with models of the proposed town, and Farzad and Nye drove around the country. Over the next 2 years, startups began populating Prototown. Hard tech industries, such as manufacturing and defense, are booming in Austin, giving projects like Prototown a much-needed tailwind. That includes a new Samsung multi-billion-dollar semiconductor facility based around 30 miles northeast from Austin, and aerospace company Firefly. Bedrock's Robotics chief executive Boris Softman visited the site last year, looking for land to test the company's autonomous construction machinery, including excavators to dig ditches without human control. Bedrock was based around San Francisco with a few small test sites, but the team needed more room. Now, as many as 20 Bedrock employees work in Prototown, where the company has 40 acres. That's a great ecosystem here, Selfman said. Getting that level of flexibility is really hard. And how Democrats pivoted on redistricting. Obama backs efforts to help party counter President Trump's gerrymandering push. Backstage at a rally in the final days before Abigail Spanberger's election to be governor of Virginia, Barack Obama approached Don Scott, the Speaker of the state's House of Delegates, and said he would back another political fight, Virginia's redrawing of the congressional maps, to help boost Democrats' chances in the midterm elections. The encouragement was part of Obama's evolution on redistricting. The former president, who had long been critical of gerrymandering for partisan gain, hasn't just shifted his stance to accommodate redrawing maps temporarily, but has gone all in on the effort. While campaigning for Spanberger in November, Obama was lending his support to a redistricting effort in California, which would lead to new maps seeking to eliminate up to 5 GOP congressional seats. He implied to me he's going to be there. That's all I needed. It's done, Scott said in an interview following an election this past week in which Virginia voters narrowly approved a measure to redraw the state's congressional map ahead of the midterms. He put the battery in my back. Let's go. The new map seeks to change the state's congressional delegation from 6 House Democrats and 5 Republicans to 10 Democrats and 1 Republican. It comes as both parties try to redraw congressional maps in their favor ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. President Trump kicked off the effort last year by urging Texas lawmakers to redraw their maps, but some Republicans now worry it has backfired as Democrats in other states have shown a willingness to counter. Democrats in charge of Virginia hoisted this upon the people. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, told reporters after his party lost, a 10-to-1 map is not justified in that state. From redistricting to more hardball negotiations on Capitol Hill that forced 2 government shutdowns and a continuing lapse in funding for the Department of Homeland Security, Democrats are letting go of taking the moral high ground against Trump in favor of engaging in brass-knuckle politics. Democrats finally are standing up to defend ourselves, Scott said. Republicans thought we would do what we always do and have the sanctimonious, self-righteous conversations, virtue signal, and not do anything that we didn't do that this time. These are a new type of Democrats. First in California, then in Virginia, Obama, then those close to him, say he has tried to balance using his voice judiciously with an increasing need to use his platforms to push back against Trump. The former president views Trump's demands in GOP state legislature to pursue unusual mid-decade redistricting as a blatant attack on democracy. Democrats and Republicans have for years engaged in gerrymandering following the decennial census. Obama views the Democratic response as appropriate in an emergency, as long as it's approved by voters and is temporary. He became comfortable with the approach before last year's Prop 50 redistricting effort in California, which Democrats won handily. California Governor Gavin Newsom knew he could be successful if he could get Obama on board. In conversations with the former president and his team, the California governor and his advisors stressed the new map would be temporary and decided on by voters in a ballot initiative. People familiar with the discussions said. Obama became convinced that while independent redistricting remained his long-term goal, extraordinary measures were needed in extraordinary circumstances. Polling conducted by Newsom's advisors showed that Obama wasn't only overwhelmingly popular among Democrats in the state, but also independents, advisors said. They went all in, putting $12 million behind an ad featuring Obama's endorsement of the ballot measure in the closing days. The measure passed overwhelmingly, giving the liberal state 5 more seats to offset redistricting efforts launched by President Trump in red states. We've had more robust response than an op-ed and doing some interviews and bemoaning what Republicans did in Texas, said Eric Holder, former Attorney General under Obama, who founded an organization that pushes for fair congressional maps and helped get Obama engaged in the elections. The reality is that we have to save our democracy now if we want to ultimately heal it. Democrats ended up winning by just 3 percentage points. Republicans said the margin was a good sign for them, given the state had just voted for a Democratic governor in November by more than 15 percentage points. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrats' House leader, whose future speakership rides on Democrats taking back the House, spent much of last year organizing for the effort, including meeting with state lawmakers and rallying voters all over the country, including in Virginia, just before the election. Groups aligned with Jeffries invested more than $38 million into the Virginia effort, by far the largest donation on either side. After Democrats won the measure, Jeffries declared maximum warfare everywhere, all the time. And in U.S. Watch, appeals court says asylum ban illegal. An appeals court Friday blocked President Trump's executive order suspending asylum access at the southern border of the U.S., a pillar of the Republican president's plan to crack down on migration. A 3-judge panel from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit found immigration laws give people the right to apply for asylum at the border, and the president can't circumvent that. The court opinion stems from action taken by Trump on Inauguration Day 2025, when he declared that the situation at the southern border constituted an invasion of America, and he was suspending the physical entry of migrants and their ability to seek asylum until he decides it is over. The plan concluded the Immigration and Nationality Act doesn't authorize the president to remove the plaintiffs under procedures of his own making, allowing him to suspend plaintiffs' rights to apply for asylum or curtail procedures for adjudicating their anti-torture claims. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said the Department of Justice would seek further review. "We are sure we will be vindicated," she wrote in an emailed statement. And firing squad added to death penalty. The Trump administration said Friday it will allow executions by firing squad and restore the use of lethal injections in federal death penalty cases. In a report, the Justice Department said many of the limits the Biden administration put on carrying out federal death sentences would be removed. Trump, in his first term, reactivated the federal death penalty after a 17-year hiatus and put 13 inmates to death in its final months, the last execution taking place 4 days before President Joe Biden's inauguration. The Biden administration ordered a federal moratorium on capital punishment in 2021 and issued last-minute commutations shortly before the end of his term for 37 of the 40 federal inmates on death row at the time. Since Trump's return to office, the Justice Department has ended the moratorium and is seeking death sentences against 44 defendants. Inmates have challenged the use of lethal injections in the past on grounds they may violate Eighth Amendment protections against cruel and unusual punishment. The Justice Department's report found the use of pentobarbital to carry out death sentences is consistent with the Eighth Amendment. The department said it has ordered the Bureau of Prisons to reinstate the execution protocol adopted during the first Trump administration, which relies on pentobarbital as the lethal agent. The Justice Department also said it was considering relocating or expanding the footprint of federal death row, including possibly constructing an additional execution facility. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And in World Watch, United Kingdom assisted suicide bill fails in Parliament. A proposed bill to allow terminally ill adults in England and Wales to choose to end their lives failed Friday as parliamentary time ran out, nearly a year since elected members of parliaments gave their backing. Though the Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill was passed by the House of Commons last June, the UK's revising chamber, the House of Lords, effectively talked it out. Since then, proponents of what has been termed assisted dying, sometimes referred to as assisted suicide, hoped it would mark the biggest change to social policy in the UK since abortion was partially legalized in 1967. But opponents in the House of Lords have managed to hold up its passing by filing more than 1,200 amendments. This is believed to be a record for a piece of legislation that was tabled by a backbencher rather than by the government. The sponsor of the bill in the House of Lords, Charlie Falconer, said he felt despondent that a piece of legislation so important to so many has not failed on its merits but failed as a result of procedural wrangling. And in Kosovo, Serbs sentenced over police clash. A court in Kosovo Friday sentenced 2 ethnic Serbs to life in prison and another to 30-year jail term over a clash in 2023 between police and a group of Serb gunmen that left 4 people dead and sent tensions soaring in the Balkan region. The basic court in Pristina, Kosovo's capital, convicted the 3 men of violating the country's constitutional order and inciting terror activities with an aim to break away the predominantly ethnic Serb northern Kosovo and unite it with Serbia. The clash in September 2023 saw heavily armed Serb men set up barricades in northern Kosovo before launching an hours-long gun battle with Kosovo police at Banksta village. A Kosovo police officer and 3 gunmen were killed in this clash. Kosovo has accused Serbia of arming and supporting the group. Belgrade denied the allegations, saying the men acted on their own. Serbia does not recognize Kosovo's 2008 Declaration of Independence. A total of 45 people were initially charged, but the trial was held for just 3 who were in custody. And taxes boost the cost of gasoline overseas. The war in Iran has lifted U.S. gasoline prices to more than $4 a gallon, the highest average price in 4 years. Yet U.S. prices are still lower than they are in Germany, South Korea, and most other developed countries. The U.S. produces more oil than any nation in the world, and far more than it did during the oil crisis of the 1970s. So it's more insulated from global supply shocks than many countries. Americans are sensitive to gas prices. The average American drives 13,000 miles a year, according to the federal government. Yet for years, U.S. consumers have paid lower gas prices than consumers in many other countries. Much of the discrepancy is because of taxes. According to S&P Global Energy, the U.S. government charges one of the lowest rates in the world. American consumers paid an average $3.64 a gallon in March, with only about 60 cents of that made up of federal and state taxes. The average hit $4 a gallon at the end of that month. In most places in Europe, taxes compose 50 to 60% of the retail price of fuel, said Rob Smith, S&P Energy's director of global fuel retail. Germans paid on average of $8.75 a gallon in March, more than half of which stemmed from value-added taxes and fuel excise duties. In Mexico, gas averaged $5.07 a gallon in March, of which nearly $2 was tax. Mexicans near the U.S. border often fill up their tanks in El Paso and Brownsville in Texas to take advantage of cheaper prices. While the U.S. primarily channels fuel taxes into maintaining roads and highways, other countries have used it for that and much more, from funding public transportation systems to government spending at large. Only more recently have states such as California added carbon and environmental related charges and regulations on gasoline to discourage use of fossil fuels. Such policies still remain limited in the U.S. and are generally less extensive than those in Europe. And in the exchange, United made a crazy bet. It could be your favorite airline. Before he started in the airline industry, and long before he was the CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby was a serious gambler. He taught himself to count cards, raking in money on trips to Atlantic City and Las Vegas. To this day, he brags about getting kicked out of casinos all over the world. He's still on the banned list at hotels up and down the Vegas Strip. A few years ago, he walked into the Bellagio during Super Bowl week and headed for the high-limit poker table. To set up a line of credit, Kirby handed over his ID. As he waited for his chips, a manager approached. The chief executive of one of the world's largest airline was told he was welcome to spend his money on poker or any other casino game, but not on blackjack. It's been at least 15 years since I've played, Kirby said, but I'm in the database. These days, Kirby doesn't have to be in a casino to place a bet. When he took over United, he made the biggest one in his career, that United would reinvent itself as a beloved airline. United makes no secret that it's taking a page from the most valuable U.S. carrier, Delta, which has proven over the past 15 years that the playbook works. Now it's also working for United, and Kirby's bet is paying off. He's banking on his strategy to carry United through an uncertain moment in the airline industry. Rising fuel prices and ticket fares are wreaking havoc on rivals that compete on price. Kirby said he believes that giving premium customers reasons to feel loyal to the brand will help insulate United from the volatility. Those reasons include nicer planes and seats that fold into a couch, faster Wi-Fi, fancier wine, and a mobile app that flyers actually find helpful. His vision of the future is built on the idea that people will like a product enough to pay more for it, which was long considered blasphemous in the airline business. Until recently, the industry believed air travel was a commodity, that customers only cared about price and schedule. But that's wrong, Kirby says. The experience matters too, and he's now convinced that a better one can earn brand loyalty. I always thought this would work, Kirby said. And this past week, United's Chicago headquarters. Even I have been surprised at how much difference you can make by investing in all of these things. It's also making lots of money. United shares have doubled since the start of 2021, when every other major U.S. airline besides Delta watched its stocks fall. Last year, Delta and United accounted for over 90% of the industry's profits. For more than a decade, Kirby has insisted that the U.S. only has room for 2 successful premium airlines. To make sure his airline would be one of them, he outlined a growth strategy 5 years ago that he called United Next. His plan involved ordering hundreds of bigger jets from Boeing and Airbus, dumping many of United's smallest regional jets, and revamping the airline's existing fleet with seat-back screens, power ports, and more spacious overhead bins. The more we invest, the more we win, he says. The audacious CEO has such grand ambitions for United that he recently pitched President Trump his boldest idea yet, a mega merger with American Airlines. Before American rejected the proposal and Trump publicly shot down a potential deal, airline officials dismissed any merger as impossible to get past antitrust enforcers, a typical bluster from Kirby. Some even speculated that he would be out for revenge against American, where he was a rising star until he was passed over for the top job. Whether or not it ever happens, the idea alone was so brash that the industry agreed it could have come from only one person. Love him or hate him, everyone in the business is deeply obsessed with Scott Kirby. Not long ago, he was at a meeting for Global Airline Trade Association. He told the Airlines Confidential podcast when he looked around the room full of his peers and stated the obvious. All airline CEOs crave the spotlight, he said. The only difference between you and me is I'm willing to admit it. Kirby, age 58, grew up in a small town outside Dallas, went to Air Force Academy with dreams of being a fighter pilot, and ended up with a much different career involving planes. After studying computer science and operations research, he interviewed for quant jobs on Wall Street, but decided he couldn't possibly live in New York. He moved back home, joined a wonky subsidiary of American Airlines, and applied his mathematical brain to pricing airplane seats. In the mid-1990s, he jumped to American West, where his strategy was keeping costs as low as possible. They bought U.S. Airways, which merged with American Airlines, and Kirby became president of what was then the world's biggest airlines. He was widely considered to be in line for the CEO until American decided in 2016 that he wasn't the right guy, and United snapped him up. As United was struggling, Delta was reorienting itself and the entire business around a radical idea that people would pay extra to fly their airline of choice. At the time, airlines believed that travelers generally picked the cheapest flight and that worked for their schedule. Delta made another wager. If it offered a better product, it could command higher prices. This is soybeans, former CEO Richard Anderson once said. Kirby believes that there are more customers willing to pay up a premium for seating than anyone's realized. The problem was that only Delta was offering a product they wanted to buy. Now the entire industry is targeting flyers who prioritize comfort. Despite the competition, Delta keeps powering ahead. With every new amenity, it's sending rivals a message. Good luck catching up. I think they're smart trying to copy us, CEO Ed Bastian said this month. This week, Kirby fired back. I did take inspiration from what Delta has done, but we long ago stopped copying them. When Kirby took over as CEO in 2020, he realized that United would have to spend its way back into competition, and he knew where to start. To Kirby and Andrew Nocella, a revenue guru he recruited from American, many of United problems could be traced back to the industry's sorriest plane, the 50-seat regional jet. Customers hate the tiny, cramped metal baguettes that feed passengers from small cities across the country to major hubs. They typically don't have Wi-Fi or enough space in overhead bins to fit full-size roller bag. Most important, they don't have business class seats. With the airlines losing market share, United's top executive decided we're going to need some bigger planes. In 2021, they placed the airline's largest ever order for 270 single-aisle planes from Boeing and Airbus, followed by the next year by 100 narrow bodies and at least 100 wide-body Dreamliner jets for international routes. as airlines ripped out screens for seat backs, entertainment, to make planes lighter and cheaper. Since everyone had their own phones and tablets, Kirby put screens back on planes, convinced that their mere presence made a huge difference. For business travelers, the ability to answer emails from 30,000 feet is no longer a luxury but a necessity. So in 2024, United struck a deal with Starlink to equip its planes with the industry's fastest Wi-Fi. This service has been installed on regional jets, and United says it will be on 50% of the mainline fleet by the end of the year and 100% next year. Until then, you're stuck fighting spotty internet from Newark to San Francisco. Meanwhile, Kirby keeps pressing executives to improve the experience of flying United, repeating one phrase that has become a mantra: your job is wow. By now, everyone at the airline is used to Kirby's personality. His route planners know not to let him in on splashy new destinations too far in advance. He has trouble keeping them secret. His aggressive style doesn't always work in his favor. This week, the FAA interviewed in a United versus American turf war for gates at Chicago O'Hare's airport and hit Kirby's airline with deeper cuts. Then his suggestion of a merger was swathed away by Trump, the latest reminder that Kirby can overplay his hand. There is one change that executives hail as the most consequential of them all: removing delay codes, says David Kinzelman, United's chief customer officer. It's probably the single greatest cultural shift. Before that shift, the airline doled out blame with a code for every possible cause of delay. We would argue for hours about a 1-minute delay. Now, instead of pitting teams against each other, United spends that time figuring out how to solve the problem. It's giving passengers more clarity, too. Every frequent flyer recognizes the frustrations of flights getting pushed back 15 minutes, then another 15 minutes. Kirby told his team to pretend he's on the plane and demanding information, and then give passengers that information. We can't just tell customers everything. Why can't we just tell customers everything that you would tell me? He asked. When security lines snaked through terminals during a partial government shutdown last month, United spotted an opportunity to introduce live TSA wait times to its app. Now it's installing AI-enabled cameras in airport lobbies to collect the data and monitor queues in real time. The way Kirby sees it, moves that look too risky to others are safe bets. The truth is, I have a different view of risk than most people. To him, running an airline is like the highest stakes version of a game that casinos still let him play, poker. You've got to know your own hand, know the other players, and constantly adjust how you play. I don't actually gamble, he said. I do smart, expected value things. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And Google pledges up to $40 billion more to Anthropic. Alphabet's Google, already a close partner to Anthropic, plans to invest as much as $40 billion in additional capital in the company, a spokesperson for the artificial intelligence company said. Google will invest $10 billion in Anthropic at its current $350 billion valuation, and could invest up to $30 billion more if the company meets certain performance milestones. Anthropic this month has secured up to $65 billion in new funding commitments as it races to keep pace with OpenAI ahead of potential initial public offering. Earlier this month, Anthropic deepened its partnership with Google and Broadcom, adding multiple gigawatts of capacity of their TPU chips. It also bolstered its ties to Amazon, which is investing $5 billion in the company as part of a commitment that could reach up to $25 billion. Anthropic, led by Chief Executive Dario Amodei, is securing new capital commitments at a time when it has been constrained by the enormous computing power required to keep up with the surging growth of its hit product, Claude Code. Recently, the company said its revenue run rate had reached $30 billion, up from about $9 billion at the end of last year. In February, Anthropic raised $30 billion in new funds at a $380 billion valuation, including the investment. And Porsche to sell stake in Bugatti venture. Porsche agreed to sell its stakes in the hypercar joint venture Bugatti Rimac and electric vehicle maker Rimac Group, moving to focus on its core business as it continues to work through a turnaround program. Porsche and Rimac reestablished the Bugatti Rimac joint venture in 2021 to house the Bugatti brand, with Porsche holding 45% share and Rimac holding the remaining 55%. Porsche also holds a 20.6% stake in Rimac. The deal announced Friday will see Porsche sell both those stakes to a consortium led by U.S.-based investment firm HOF Capital, and which includes Abu Dhabi-based Blue 5 Capital as its largest investor, as well as institutional investors across the U.S. and European Union. Financial terms weren't disclosed. With the sale of our stake, we demonstrate that we will focus Porsche on the core business, Michael Lettiers, chief executive of the German luxury sports car maker, said. Former McLaren boss Lettiers took over at Porsche at the start of this year after a series of guidance downgrades last year as the automaker grappled with a slow uptake of electric vehicles, weakness in China, and U.S. tariffs. He has begun laying out plans to turn Porsche's fortunes around through streamlining the management structure, cutting hierarchies, and reducing bureaucracy to create a leaner and faster organization and boost the desirability of its products. The company is investing in gas-powered and hybrid models after deciding to delay the rollout of new electric cars, part of product realignment plan that saw the company book around 2.4 billion euros, equivalent to $2.8 billion, in one-off costs last year. Friday's deal is expected to complete by year-end, with Rimac taking control of Bugatti Rimac and creating a strategic partnership with HOF Capital and Blue 5 Capital to support the company's next phase of growth. HOF Capital will become Rimac's largest shareholder alongside Mate Rimac, founder of Rimac and chief executive of Bugatti Rimac. And in markets, Spencer Jacob saying, wave of pain is likely headed our way over the Hormuz blockade. Prices on our screens might be making us complacent about a looming economic drag. The Iran conflict's effects will get a lot uglier. There's a widespread faith that, while not perfect, the stock market is good at seeing around corners. For example, it often swoons months before economists predict recessions, and then rallies before they give the all clear. Millions of people putting their savings at risk distill available information pretty well. But the hit to global supplies of oil, gas, fertilizer, helium, aluminum, and other commodities from the Strait of Hormuz blockade is the sort of thing the market and most Wall Street professionals are bad at processing. This wouldn't be the first time a bubbling threat that will be obvious in hindsight was underestimated. We know now that by late February 2020, COVID-19 was spreading at a speed that quarantines could no longer contain. Investment strategists played armchair epidemiologists for weeks, dutifully updating case counts and laying out scenarios. The whole world shutting down wasn't their base case. Stocks hit a record on February 19th, and the gravity of the emergency didn't resonate with many Americans until weeks later. The main exception to Wall Street's relaxed message about Hormuz is from energy specialists. I've been surprised by how the stock market is willing to look through the fact that the strait continues to remain shut, said Josh Martin, head of securities and equity capital markets at Pickering Energy Partners, on a company podcast. Americans are concerned about pump prices, but with no physical shortages, 1 billion missing barrels seems as abstract as 10,000 pneumonia cases in far-off Wuhan. Even with a deal, stories will soon start to roll in about travel disruptions and factory shutdowns in Asia and then in Europe. In the best case, it could take 6 months for markets like jet fuel and petrochemicals to normalize. Agriculture will feel the pinch for longer, and liquefied natural gas will be crimped for years because of damaged infrastructure in major producer Qatar. The COVID comparison isn't perfect. High prices are denting demand already, and this isn't as big or sudden of a crisis as the pandemic. The strategic reserve releases supplies already at sea, and until recently, Iran's own substantial shipments have dulled the blow and made it seem less serious to ordinary consumers. The damage is cumulative, though. One reason energy futures don't fully reflect this is that any glimmer of hope blows up bullish derivative positions. Two of the largest per barrel drops in crude futures ever have occurred in recent weeks. A wave of pain is headed for major economies under the rosiest scenario. Even if it's worse in Asia and Europe, it will be felt on the bottom lines of American companies that rely on their customers and their factories. And finally, Thrive bets on San Francisco Giants. Thrive Capital is taking a stake in the San Francisco Giants through a new venture, a major bet on a sports business by a firm known for high-tech investments. It's the first investment from this firm's newest strategy called Thrive Eternal, a permanent capital vehicle focused on making a small number of long-term investments in franchises and cultural institutions that can't be replicated by artificial intelligence. The venture firm's founder, Joshua Kushner, brother of President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, said on X that such institutions will matter even more in a world shaped by abundant intelligence where creation scales and distribution fragments. Former Disney CEO Bob Iger, who the Journal reported recently rejoined Thrive on an advisory capacity, will help with the new effort. Iger was a venture partner in the firm for a brief period in 2022 and left to return to Disney as CEO later that same year. The investment is a minority, non-controlling stake, according to the person familiar with the matter, and is subject to approval by the Major League Baseball. Thrive, historically focused on tech, has increasingly moved beyond traditional venture-style investing in recent years, exploring new structures and categories of investments. For example, the firm led an investment in the film studio A24 in 2024. Founded in 2009, Thrive has backed companies including Instagram, Wiz, Databricks, and OpenAI, of which it is one of the largest stakeholders. Earlier this year, the firm raised $10 billion, including a $9 billion fund dedicated to large, late-stage investments. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 25th, 26th issues of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition. We read from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition every Monday at 7 a.m. Your reader has been Elaine. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings, 24 hours a day, of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service has broadcast almost 40 years of radio readings to those without sight. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes